Yeah. So hello everyone. My Google Summer of Code project mainly revolves around the Buildpacks GitHub Actions repository. And before we started on our actual project of automating the staging index repository and registry, we wanted to clear the previous issue of verifying the block namespaces. If there are block namespaces, we need to know that list of block namespaces, and we need to block the access to those namespaces. So this is the pull request that was merged yesterday, and with this pull request, we were able to create the list of block namespaces. And right now, like if I share the screen, let me share the screen. So uh, what it does is basically we are getting the input list, and this input list, what does this input list is basically we are just inputting a string basically, but we are returning an array of strings. And how are they being separated? They are being separated using a comma. So we are splitting them using a comma. So what is this list about? This list is about the blocked namespaces, the namespaces that will be blocked. And correspondingly, because this was updated inside the internal toolkit.go, I updated the corresponding tests as well in the internal toolkit. Uh, Along with that, we developed the logic so that the namespace verification is works fine. And what did we do here was basically um, uh, we have created a function is block namespace, and we are passing our config struct there. And if it is returning true, that is if it is a block namespace, then we will return that this namespace is restricted, so we will block the access. So what we did here, we in the inside the struct, we created a block namespace uh, which is of type array of strings. So as we say in Golang, slice of string. So here we are getting this is our uh, what we can say, the list of block namespaces. So right now this is CNCF build pack, CNB build packs, IU build pack. We can later on add more block namespaces, and we are assigning it to the C dot block namespaces so that it overrides the value that has been assigned as the environment variable by the user also. So it does both the thing, and this is our function that implements the logic. So we are passing our namespaces. Sorry, we are going through the entire loop of block namespaces list, and we are matching the namespace. If the namespace matches the names mentioned in the block namespace, then we will be returning true, because then it will be a block namespace. So we will have to block it, otherwise we will just return a false, and it will return and it will work normal. So that is how it works. And for this also, I added a test. I added the corresponding context text here in verify namespace owner underscore test.go. So after this, we were able to merge it with our Buildpacks GitHub Actions yesterday. This was the progress that we have made till now. What are our next steps? So our next steps will be, now what we have to do is I have created, based on suggestion of Joe, I have created the fork of uh, just give me a moment. I have created the fork of GitHub Buildpacks registry index. So what I will do after that, planning to do is that I will configure it to my local pack CLI, so that it uses my fork instead of the official repository. And I will be doing it using pack add registry option, pack config registries add option. So we will be doing with that. I have already done that. Now I have to just follow one blog to test it out and to see if the thing that we have done yesterday, like whether when we are registering a normal build pack with the namespace that we have mentioned to be in the block list, whether it is working or not. So that we will be testing it then. And after that, we will be working on the main part of the project, which is like right now, if you see the version, yesterday only the new version was released from 4.1 to 4.2, the GitHub Actions. So now what we need to do is we want to automate this process, and we want to automate both the PR to update that version and the testing of it. So this will be the main goal of the project. This is something that we will be working on next. But before working on that next, I guess I thought to try it out manually. So Joe suggested the same. So I'm going through the entire process. I've been reading the blog throughout the day, and today and maybe tomorrow, by tomorrow, it will be done manually, and then we will try to figure out the logic how to automate this entire thing, the process of both the PR to update the version and as well as the testing. So that's about the progress. So thank you so much. If there are any questions, if there are anything to clarify, I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share that. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing the update with us. It's cool to see progress moving on this.
Welcome.
Does anyone want to ask any questions? All right, thanks so much for sharing. Next on our agenda today is stacks. I know I'm interested in talking about Stephen's remove stacks RFC. It's a little bit unfortunate that we don't have the bigger group we usually get here today, because I'm sure people all got feelings about this one. But even probably in the small group, I wonder if people have questions.
I noticed you left some feedback on it today, and I responded to a couple things, but they're definitely open questions and places, things we should probably talk about at some point. So happy to hear.
I really like the overall vision. I feel like there's probably lots of details we need to work out, and like maybe we could split this into a couple RFCs. I don't know. It might be nice to separate the like dynamic run image selection from changes to existing things like stack IDs and mixins.
Yeah, this is probably like 5 RFCs. I just didn't have time and said, okay, this is what I think it should look like probably before we go 1.0. Definitely needs work before it can be merged. But also happy to talk about the specifics.
Yeah, I didn't even make it all the way through for my commenting. I guess the thing that I thought would be interesting to talk about is sort of like how you're mentioning run Docker file interacting with dynamic run image selection.
Yeah. So originally I wasn't thinking those things would interact. I just figured this is how app developers supply packages, and also run image selection happens. And there's no way to have it automatically select a smaller base image based on packages that you're specifying in your app directory in a Docker file. That those would be things to support language modules. Buildpacks wouldn't request those anyways. It's going to solve a separate use case, but it's close to working. Like it could be, we could tie it more into the API. I almost feel like we shouldn't though, because the point of the proposal is that like this is not a problem we should really try to solve. Buildpacks, we've designed this whole API to be a great application level abstraction for installing dependencies in layers on top of some API compatible base image, instead of trying to solve operating system package installation better than every Linux distribution has solved it in a generic way, which seems very hard, right? Especially given that we can't really provide value there. Let's give up on it and then provide a hook for people to use Docker files that are just Docker files, if that makes sense. You're going to break any advantages that we had before. And so
I agree with this because I feel like stack packs already open up that can of worms. But if you're not, modifying things in this sort of restricted way that works in our system, like non-overlapping layer that participates in this stricter life cycle. Like if Stackpack can already just, go change whatever, I feel like a build pack isn't the right interface for that. Like a Docker file is already a great interface for changing whatever.
Why invent a new interface to solve a problem that's already solved, that's worse, or that has no advantages over the old interface, right?
Yeah.
So so the idea wasn't that it would interact. It was just I had a whole bunch of ideas about stacks and then put them in one RFC and didn't want to, go through the effort of detangling everything. But we could make them interact pretty easily, right? Like if you really wanted to, you could label the Docker files with packages and then match those in addition to the packages that, that are coming from the run image, and then you could select a smaller run image. Just be some metadata you have to add. I don't think it's a terrible idea. We could also add it after though. We don't need it to get the stuff merged.
Yeah. I guess it worries me a little bit. I kind of want like some vision of how they interact if we really want to do both. I wonder if we don't need the dynamic run image selection. Is that just like a nice to have, but it adds more complexity than it's worth? Like right now, I feel like we have the reason it feels compelling is because we have these big builders that support multiple language families. I've started to feel like maybe that isn't really providing a lot of value, that we should have smaller. I mean, as a project, we don't specify this one way or another, but sort of want to push people as a convention to like smaller builders per language family. And then maybe you don't need to make as many dynamic choices about the run image.
I wasn't thinking of it as in different run images could support different languages that need more things. More like sometimes you want to build your thing on top of distroless and sometimes you don't. But maybe get rid of the automatic dynamic run image selection. Let people specify multiple images in the builder and then provide a flag where the developer can choose which run image gets used in the end. And then it interacts with a Docker file because you can put the stuff in the Docker file and select the small run image.
If I was going to make a case for run image selection, it's like maybe the one that I would do. So like thinking about, Paketo Java, I think we want all of that to run on distroless, and we're moving towards making that all run on distroless. But there's going to be a couple cases like when you're running Tomcat, where Catalina starts with a shell script where you can't run on distroless. So it'd be kind of cool. Like I'm going to make a case for your dynamic run image selection. I'm just wondering how many cases are like this, where like if you build your app, you'd almost always get distroless, but if you're running Tomcat and it needs bash, then you get Bionic.
So what if that worked, but the app developer had to say, oh, it's a Tomcat app. I'm going to pass dash run image equals, larger or something like that, right? Like, how bad would it be if it wasn't automatic? Or they could install whatever they need specifically in their Docker files, right? If they wanted to provide just the stuff that their Tomcat app needs. I don't know if that makes sense in this context, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I think that gets less useful on a distroless image. I think because you then, have to be a little bit more thoughtful. You need to do like a multi-stage Docker file where you're copying bash from somewhere to somewhere else, because I don't think you get on the distroless image, you can't, go apt install bash.
Multi-stage Docker files should work great though with the run and build Docker files, because you could just, do the second image as the parameterized one.
I guess I'm curious about like, okay, so that's one case where dynamic run image selection would be good. I think it might be interesting to populate this RFC with more examples, and then we could decide how important this problem is to us, and therefore how much complexity we're willing to introduce in order to solve it.
That makes sense. I think an advantage of starting with forcing the app developer, like having them just, when you build the builder, you provide a map of some name to run image, and there's a default one. And then when you're doing pack build with the builder, you can select a particular run image from it in the command line. Would be that if we want a dynamic run image selection in the future, we can add it on top of that, and it would just be an override.
Yeah, I guess the other thing we could do is we could dynamically select the run image and then run the Docker file.
That would be hard because, oh wait, no, dynamically select the run image and then run the Docker file, but then you don't know what packages are installed by the Docker file, right? That is what happens actually. I think that's what's.
Yeah, you don't know if you've met your requirements until you run the Docker file.
Right. That's probably.
So you might be dynamically selecting a run image that does not meet all of your requirements.
Right. Because you have to run the Docker file.
And you get the one that's closest, and then you run the Docker file, but then it's like, well, that gets a little weird because my Docker file is to extend which image exactly?
Can't tell if you think we should do run image selection initially or not.
Oh, I kind of think we should do it. I'm trying to think it through. Like maybe we dynamically select, but if you pass a run Docker file, then you don't dynamically select. You have to explicitly select in that case. But then it starts getting, I don't want sort of the user experience to have too many ifs in it,
So just you get the default run it.
That's what I'm interested about. Or if there's multiples, you have to choose if you're going to pass your run.docker file.
Or you just always have to choose. There's no dynamic selection. You just always have to choose if you want one that's not the default. Would that be that bad?
I guess you can already choose a run image. If you're explicitly choosing a run image, then we don't need a builder to actually contain references to multiples of them.
But then you have to specify a specific Docker. What about mirrors and?
I guess how are you explicitly choosing if you're not? What does choosing look like?
When you build in Builder TOML, right? This, as proposed, it would look like an ordered list of run images and all their individual run image mirrors. And it would run through that list in order and pick the first one that matches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of that, it's a map, and it has name, name, run image and mirrors, name to run image and mirrors. And one of them is called default. And the default one runs automatically, or it has a default key and it has another name. When you do a build, it always picks the default one, unless you do -- run image. And then there's another notation that's not explicitly used this run image from Docker, that's used the labeled one in the builder. So you do, -- run image Tomcat in the Tomcat case, and we pick the special image that's for Tomcat out of the builder, but you don't have to know where the Tomcat image lives in your registry.
I guess that feels less compelling to me than the dynamic selection. Like, I'm not sure how much value that adds on top of just like, someone named the image in Docker Hub Tomcat, right?
But then you have to, if you have an internal artifactory and your image is there.
It gets you something, but yeah, I guess I like the dynamic one better.
Interesting. I feel like the dynamic one is trying to make it part of the API again, which is what I was trying to avoid in the first place, sort of. It's like, I want it to be a really boring hook that's very easy to understand and not, something that is more complicated than that. I don't want to set an expectation that anything you're installing in your Docker file is managed, right? That we're going to update it in any way that, like it should be really clear that you're on the hook for keeping all of that stuff up to date. You got to manually, if you don't want it to cache your app packages, you have to manually put something in your Docker file that prevents the caching from happening. Like really not, should not come across as part of the API. And I worry that integrating it into the run image selection kind of implies that.
Yeah, if I sound like I'm going back and forth, it's because I am. I like both of these ideas. I just don't like how they interact with each other. Does that make sense?
Yep. Do they need to interact with each other though?
Well, that's the question. It's like if I have a builder that has multiple run images and I want to extend my run image, then they need to interact with each other, I think.
If you have a builder that has multiple images and it selects the most minimal image for the build pack, and your Docker file is just about application dependencies, not about build pack level dependencies, right? Then they solve different problems. It really doesn't matter that what run image was selected. A Docker file is going to get applied onto it afterwards.
Okay. I can see that. Then we so we dynamically select, we apply the Docker file to the thing we dynamically selected. Hopefully that works. If it doesn't, then you can explicitly select.
That's what's in the proposal already.
Okay. Just sorry to make you talk through that again out loud.
No. It's good feedback. Or I'd also be happy to do less of that, I think, especially to start.
I've sort of like radically changed my outlook on the spec recently, where I kind of want to do less of everything. I think we tried to be too fancy and we made things too hard to use.
It created too many terms also.
Yeah.
Like my favorite part of this is just removing the word stack and mix it. I think that's going to be more impactful than anything else inside of it.
Especially mixin. I feel like people don't really, they only learn about mixins to the extent that they need to. Because mixins don't get you anything. All mixins do is make things fail. And sometimes you want things to fail because they're not going to work, but I don't think it's worth the complexity to get that early failure most of the time, especially because if people aren't using them correctly, you don't get the early failure anyways.
Yeah, I think just moving to a standardized formatted list of packages and using the packages where we need to care about packages makes a lot more sense, especially if we have Perl IDs on them. I think some of that validation is helpful, but as warnings in very particular circumstances, not as a framework.
Yeah. And then it should stop trying to solve problems like arbitrary things that aren't packages. It's like we just won't do that. That's fine. People can either put it on a particular stack image and communicate that if they want to, or people can install it with a Docker file.
Much more straightforward. Should I go through some of the comments here? Maybe like you're worried about tiny. I agree. I think we just remove this restriction, or only the architecture and OS has to match.
Yeah.
And then this was something that we may disagree on.
I think Cyclone DX being the package list that we validate against is a little noisy. I think it's noisy, and there are different ways to express those things. I'd rather like extract the identifiers into something less noisy.
is there additional data besides what's in the Cyclone DX formatted list that you'd add, or you just extract data from it and then produce it in a different format and then bake that onto the image?
I'd extract data from it, produce in a different format, bake it into a label. I think hopefully that would be small enough that it could be a label, which would make everything easier for everyone. Like I know we want to put the bomb in a layer because we have to and make tooling to make it easier, but I don't want us to start putting lots of things in layers because I think it just gets confusing. And also I think there's probably a couple ways you could specify these things in Cyclone DX. It's like if you have a package that's a dependency of a package, you know, are you nesting it in a, I forget what all the terms are, like an assembly under your package, or are they all peers? Like I kind of just don't want to worry about that.
Can you not get all the information you care about from like package URL? Like if you had a flattened array of package URLs, that should tell you like pretty much what all the packages are, what their versions are. That's about all the information I think you would want. Am I missing something?
I agree with that. I want us to take that and make it a label for people to use to keep the API simple for platforms or lifecycle, whoever needs to use it, instead of requiring those components to parse Cyclone DX.
Yeah. So I'm not going to push back very hard on this, but I just want to frame it a little bit differently. So actually the requirement that you put them back on the label instead of putting them as a layer that's referenced in the label, if we really believe that it's never going to be too long, then that's a good justification for it. Like it's one request instead of two. Okay. I question that it's never going to be too long because you could have a lot of packages. Someone could put things in the stack because they're Perl URLs. You know, I don't know if it makes sense to restrict them to just OS packages, right? You can imagine somebody installing a lot of Ruby gems or something on the base image and then listing a huge amount of Ruby gems in that Cyclone DX formatted thing. And maybe that's something that we care about matching against. I don't think it's supposed to be super restrictive for packages. So I'm not quite sold on the, we should put it directly on the label. I kind of think unless it's fixed length data now, because there's a problem with it, we should immediately go to a layer for anything that could grow infinitely. But putting that to the side, assuming they're both just as many requests to get, right? The Cyclone DX list, it's not very hard to run through. It's not going to be more than, I don't know, a megabyte of data or something like that, right? It's pretty easy to run through that list, pull the Perl URLs out and compare. I'm not sure why we duplicate all the data back on the image just to avoid parsing some more bytes when we do the comparison, right? I'm not sure why it's cleaner necessarily.
I think it's because like if it was just us doing the comparison, I would agree, but I feel like there are cases where, you know, platforms want to do these things and also want to easily expose just the essential things to users so they know why things are incompatible or can, you know, decide whether to run an image before using it. And I don't want every platform's logic around this stuff to be coupled to this bomb format. It feels wrong to me.
So we're going to come up with a different format and couple all the platforms to that format instead. When the bomb format is a standardized format that we're saying we're going to primarily support throughout the life cycle in other ways.
When you say a different format, it sounds bad, but if all it is like a flat list of Perls, I don't really think that's a different format. Like Perl is the format and it's just like an array.
Do you feel like platforms aren't going to need to parse Cyclone DX? Like, I think part of the argument I heard is like, what if Cyclone DX changes? It's a complex format. You'd have to learn to parse a different format. But we've already said we're going to bake that in everywhere. If it changes, lots of stuff, platforms are going to have to change. Life cycle is going to have to change. You know, that's like the primary way we're providing that metadata. It feels like
Well, I think right now platforms can just give people this Cyclone DX bomb without having to do work to understand it or parse it.
Okay, so why do you think platforms would want to parse the list of mixins themselves, but convince me that platforms want to parse the list of mixins, they don't want to parse the Cyclone DX.
Okay, so I'm like going to choose between some run images in this world, and I want to know which run image. I'm trying to choose which run image I want to use. I want to like pack inspect base image, and figure out what packages are on there. As a human being, I don't want to see the entire Cyclone DX for that. I want to see the list of packages to figure out whether this is the base image I want or what I need to install,
So
rather than a
platforms,
giant dump of XML.
we shouldn't do XML for Cyclone. We should do JSON. But besides, yeah. I'm not going to push back hard on it, but I feel like to me, it seems more likely that platforms would want to be able to present the list of the stuff in the image to users and let them query for what version of OpenSSL is in this image, things like that, right? That feels like something that's further away from the core API, closer to things platforms might care about in the future. Like, I think platforms are going to end up having to parse that Cyclone DX realistically, and so we're just providing a small, like, part of that data in a different format that might be marginally easier to parse, but also like don't think it's that hard to read through the Cyclone DX thing and pull the Perl URLs out, even if some of them are nested, right? But
it's just kind of annoying. Like, I'm going to go implement that in Spring Boot, and I'm going to implement it in Pack. I'm going to implement it in Kpack. It's like, maybe I don't want to deal with it. I just want the list of things. Because in a lot of contexts, the platforms themselves, only care about what can and can't run. And like, there's the same data, but there's different reasons why people want to look at it. It's like, do I want to generate an OSL file? Do I want to, scan for CVEs? Or do I want to just like know what's there so I can figure out which packages to install in my Docker file? I think there are different use cases for that. And I worry that if we give the verbose thing that has all of the above in it is not useful to people. And then we're pushing a lot of complexity on the platforms, making them, slice and dice it.
last question. If both have to go in layers, proper file system layers, does that change your mind at all? Would you feel like that's suddenly more machinery, or it's already hard enough to get the data? Might as well make it only do it once.
I still think it's annoying.
You'd still do separate layers.
Yeah, I think so. Or one
Okay.
layer with 2 files in it.
But
Like,
then
whatever.
maybe that's not so bad. We're already going to use real file system layers. It's not like we can use OCI artifacts. Okay, yeah. If it's one layer with separate files in it.
I also think, like, maybe someday we need to change this all to SPDX. Like, I hope that doesn't happen, but totally could.
But I think in that case,
if every platform is already baked in this assumption that it's Cyclone, then it gets fragile.
I think in that case, we're already going to have to update the lifecycle everywhere. All the platforms are going to have to change to expect a different metadata format. It's almost easier because this changes along with the million other things that need to change. I think
The
everything
lifecycle needs to change, but I think most platforms should be able to be stupid about the bomb. It's like, do I want to see it? Yes. Do I want to, like, let me give you a file, and then users do what they want with the file. You shouldn't have to understand the format.
I think that's maybe the core philosophical disagreement is I think all platforms are going to inherently need to understand the format, because you want like pack inspect image to show you the package names and their versions and more information. than just, the Perl formatted Ubuntu package names, right? I imagine like we want to provide a really rich experience for understanding the dependencies in the image through the Pack CLI.
Some platforms, but not all, right?
But what platform is going to want to parse the mixin data but not parse the CycloneDX? That's what I have trouble with.
That's a good question. I can think of platforms that would parse neither.
Yep.
Pack probably wants to parse both. Although I will say that right now, like we show people the BOM in Pack, and Pack does not actually parse it or understand the format at all. It just gives it to you in JSON. And then if you want to do something with it, you use JQ. Like if we have a JSON version of CycloneDX, like maybe Pack also doesn't need to understand that. It's like, just pipe it to JQ anyways.
I think that's out of laziness. I don't think that's the right thing to do. Right? Pack should be like especially once it's in Cyclone and everything has a ton of extra metadata you don't care about it. I think Pack should provide a really nice interface for seeing what's inside of an image. We have all that.
Maybe, but I think it would take a while before we get there. And I'm not sure that, Pack is going to do a better job at pulling arbitrary things of interest out of a JSON file than JQ is. Like, the set of things you could possibly want to implement there is vast. And maybe we want to be a small, sharp tool. And instead, CycloneDX is going to make a great GUI or CLI tool for exploring the CycloneDX, and we just hand it over to that. Like, I don't know if we actually want to get in the business of this GUIs, CLI, or otherwise for CycloneDX.
I don't know. I think I definitely agree that the functionality shouldn't live in the core specification of the project, right? But to me, Pack is supposed to be a unified, cohesive user experience for doing real usery things, right? It feels like some ability to introspect into the dependencies you have there, building the CycloneDX libraries in, give you nice visualizations and reports and things like that about your image. Feels like a good thing. Imagine KPack would import that same logic, maybe.
Yeah, but is building it into Pack better than having Pack, write it to standard out and then we pipe it to a CycloneDX thing? I think some loose coupling is okay here and gives us flexibility.
I like small, sharp tools, but I don't know if Pack is a small, sharp tool, if that makes sense. Or we may be past that point or something. I think the life cycle, I want that to be a small, sharp tool. Again, if you want the packages on there twice, it's absolutely not even a small hill for me to die on, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure how much I want it, but I want it a little bit. I'll figure out whether I want it a lot or not.
Sounds good. Is there any other feedback in here? Anybody else have feedback on the removing stacks and mixins? Is this going to break everything in the world?
We should do a long talk about how we make this not break everything in the world.
Yeah.
I think
I'm just kidding.
I think we're going to need we need a different API version, something for stacks separated from the platform API. And then I think a given image can satisfy both. And that's the only way to not break everything. It's like you have a stack ID on there and you have all the new things. And then eventually you move to only satisfying one of the interfaces.
I agree with the latter part. That's images should be able to implement both, right? And so that either implementation can accept both. I don't know if we want to create, if I think we should create another API version. It seems like it's a lot.
I mean, I think we know we want our own stack spec to be different. I feel like stacks evolve differently than platforms. And we need to just, like, that complexity already exists, and trying to hide it under one API version is not fooling anybody.
I agree that it's a separate spec. I just don't know if we need a separate version contract for it.
When you say it's the same version, though, like right now, when you're running a build, there is one platform API that the platform is using to talk to the lifecycle. If stacks evolve differently than platforms, then you call whatever is implemented by the stack the platform API, then you can have two different versions of the platform API that are relevant at the same time, which really makes it not one API version.
I don't necessarily think it's part of the platform API. I just don't know if it needs a separate version API for that artifact. Like, I guess it probably doesn't make sense.
I felt like a data format version, a schema version. Like, I think we need a way to say, like, when you look at this image and you want to find packages or check whether it's compatible with a build pack, here is how you get the information you need and what you can expect from it. And therefore we can fail if you're passing something in that is no hope of working, you know.
How about a schema version that starts at 1 instead of 0, so we don't have to keep making something that's communicated as breaking change over and over again. We can additively put, you know, fields on there for if we want to do ID like or whatever.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Let's just get it right the first time. It'll be totally fun.
Project Toml.
I mean,
right?
I'm joking a little bit, but also, like, yeah, I'm not joking enough that I don't want to do it.
I agree that it's optimistic, but I think we have too many.
I don't have a lot of
versions
patience
of
for
grow.
much more breaking complexity in small incremental steps. Like, I want to live with what we do here for a while. And if 2.0 comes out, that can be a big deal, but we won't.
If it's a schema version, I don't think people will complain as much as if we bump the platform API or the Buildpack API to 1.0.
Yeah, there
It
are
is
some things that we already have to treat like 1.0, like the distribution API. Like, we can change some labels probably, but we cannot change the locations of those files and expect everything to be fine.
That should probably be schema versions also. That's talking about artifacts, not talking about an interface, right? The distribution API.
Yeah, I use the word API a lot. I don't know what word you want to use. The version of the thing.
Yeah, the Buildpack API is like an API because it's like code calling code, right? Platform
API too.
code calling code, right?
Except there's like a lot of weird things that aren't quite that everywhere, but yeah.
Okay. Stacks have a schema version, separate label for the mixins. Break out run images into something else. Don't integrate them with Docker files, at least yet. Don't integrate the Docker file run image selection stuff yet. That all sounds good.
Now we just need to I think to make this more actionable, we need more details. Like, do you need help breaking this into smaller things, smaller RFCs?
You're volunteering.
It was a question. Just an
I can-
innocent question, not a volunteering.
Yeah, I can do this. I think it may take a little bit of time, but I can get it broken down. Just two, just run images, and then this one separate from that, and then add some details to it. If you want to commit suggestions to things just in the GitHub interface that you can hit buttons for where you're breaking out the list or whatever, stuff like that, before I break it out, that could be helpful. In general, I think when we do RFC reviews, it'd be better if people did more proposing changes and less, but it's hard because the signed off thing makes it the copy paste signed off and everything.
Try to propose changes sometimes, but then sometimes it's like, it touches a couple places and you can't do it all in one go, and it's annoying. And
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Almost at time. Anything else?
we call it.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yep.